On this episode of the Risk Advisor podcast, a global integrator's perspective on adapting to business in today's COVID environment, we talk to Securitas Electronic Solutions leadership. With us is Kevin Engelhardt, appointed Chief Operating Officer in October 2019. Prior service, Kevin served as Executive Vice President for Field Operations and Enterprise Solutions, where he was responsible for the company's North America field operations, commercial enterprise sales, and Canada sales. Also with us is Nelson Barreto, who was appointed Vice President, Enterprise Sales in July of 2018. He leads the National Enterprise Sales Organization, which focuses on large-scale systems integration and enterprise systems across a national and global footprint. And joining us via Skype is Doug Walsh, who is the Director of Technology Solutions and provides technical sales support. Now let's join the show.
Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I am Jim Henry, and I am here with my good friend and co-host Sal Lafreri. Today's topic is a global integrator's perspective on adapting to business in today's COVID environment. So Sal, we continue to talk about serious innovation taking place with respect to technologies and their implementation. Some of it has been good, and some of it has been downright stupid. We both talked about this and thought it was a good idea to talk about how legitimate companies bring products to market in a time of crisis. The due diligence that should take place not always does.
Ain't that the truth? And how many times have we seen we've seen it the most is post 9/11. We saw it after the World Trade bombing, the first World Trade Center bombings, the rush to bring equipment out, the technology out. And what do they wind up coming out with is nothing but vaporware is what we wind up getting. And, it's always problematic for the end users that are looking for a solution, especially in the middle of what they consider to be a crisis, and they want to knee-jerk react to it. And as we had been talking about early on, it always comes back to, it would be great if somebody would actually do some due diligence on the software or on the hardware before it got deployed. And so that was sort of the impetus of trying to put together this show. And, fortunately, we were able to bring in our guest today. As you guys have heard and as we talked about in the introduction, today's guest we have with us in the studio, Kevin Engelhardt, who's the COO of Securitas. We have Nelson Barreto, the Vice President for Enterprise Sales. And joining us on Skype is Doug Walsh, the Director of Technology Solutions. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Sal.
It's great to have somebody in to be able to talk about doing some due diligence on technology before it gets deployed. But I think before we get into that, let's talk about some of the the global issues, some of the domestic issues. We'll try and chunk this down to a bit. So let's talk about domestically first. From a U.S. base, right? What approach are your clients taking to deal with COVID?
So, Sal, thanks for the question. In reality, when you look back into what would have been early March, technology wasn't really in the forefront of what organizations were really doing. It was really more about process. And the processes were driven by information that was coming in from CDC or the World Health Organization. And it was very uncharted waters, and as I think if you look back, the data was changing on a daily basis, the magnitude and the risks associated to this. So, we as an organization quickly developed a pandemic task force, and we had daily calls. And the intent of those calls were to make sure that we were protecting our customers, protecting our people, and then also protecting our business/brand, right? To make sure that we were doing our proper due diligence related to technologies, which we'll get into. But the things that we could impact that day and the day after, we're really making sure that we were doing the right things for our people and for our customers, and really trying to deem what was critical. Just saying that we were a critical workforce was one thing, but really what aspects or what attributes on a daily basis that we did were critical, and making sure that for those individuals that were interacting with our customers, we protected them with the proper PPE and things of that nature. And most of the initial conversations with our customers were around that. They were more so around, what are you doing as an organization to make sure you're protecting yourselves, but also going to protect us when you're inside of our environments? Subsequently, that then obviously changed into more of a technology question, as just like post 9/11, there was just an influx of different types of technologies that were mostly driven just on one data point, and that data point really was just the temperature reading and the understanding of what we could do to hopefully find one level of indication if someone possibly could be infected with this virus. So the initial technologies that came out were very driven on things that were going to be sitting on the edge and maybe or maybe not integrated to other applications of your security platform. But really just to say, hey, we are at least doing the most minimalistic thing that we could possibly do to hopefully help protect our work environment.
Nelson, as the government has started to reopen, how many differences have you seen in the return to work approaches in the different regions and with different clients?
Yeah, it's so in the United States, I think we were seeing, with the different types of solutions coming from the variety of different products being offered globally, our approach was really around understanding what we can offer in the United States, but as we've seen globally, there's different types of solutions that from a government standpoint didn't have the same requirements or regulations or restrictions around what they can possibly offer. So in dealing with some of our global clients, I think from our perspective, we saw that different regions had different approaches on the different types of solutions that they can provide. So it was really a collaboration between the different regions within our organization to understand in specific country if a certain product was something that they can go to market with, and if so, what would be the enterprise solution if that was something that was scalable and allowable in the United States.
So have you also been faced with different groups within a client that are driving the back to work and technology?
We have. I think we saw within security, folks are typically our primary reference point and who our interactions are with. But what we were seeing is that in our conversations with security, that they were bringing in other groups such as health and safety and legal and compliance. And for us, it was really it was us educating the client on what we're seeing in the marketplace and what we're seeing from our standpoint on what different clients were what their approach was and how they were using technology to get back into the workplace. So it was really a collaboration, but for the most part, we saw that the security team and IT were the key drivers getting input from the different stakeholders within their own organization.
Some of the things that we'd started seeing was that you had the executive level staff, the C-level staff, coming down and starting to force stuff down people's throats. Going to security, going to risk, going to legal, and saying, "Look, we have this we have the technology." And Jim and I joke about it all the time because inevitably, when it happened, and you start digging into it, you find out that it's somebody's brother-in-law or somebody like that who developed a piece of technology and wants to get it in, and stuff it down your throat. And as the from our side, the consultants, as your side's from the integrators, a lot of times you have to look at that and you go, well, this may not be the right piece for you. And it's obviously it's a little bit harder on your side because as the integrator, you're selling something. With us, we're not selling an actual product, and we're giving consulting advice. And if they take it, they take it. They don't, they don't. But how much have you seen in that regard where clients are coming to you and talking about technology and wanting to sort of push something down?
Well, that's been a tremendous driver behind this. I mean, in reality, speed, people trying to react very quickly to this pandemic drove a lot of differences of technologies, things that weren't really truly vetted out, that were going to possibly sit on the customer's network. And we go through a tremendous amount of due diligence to make sure that we really put a high level of rigor around our product selection, and we'll walk through that a little bit later. But in reality, we drive ourselves to a very high standard, and being a SOC 2 compliant organization, with the way that we manage data and that we manage our processes both internally and externally with our customers, we hold that same level of rigor with our manufacturing partners. And we want to make sure that the products we're going to put inside of our customers' environments meet certain standards. So that is one of the initial, vetting of would an application fit within our portfolio. There's probably hundreds of cameras or manufacturers that say they can do attributes of what these things do, but it's the other pieces that they don't tell you about are the ones that we really want to dig into. And it's not always being first. There's a clear delineation between bleeding edge and cutting edge, and it's okay to be cutting edge. But you really want to stay away from sometimes the pain and the suffering that goes with, going fast and being on the bleeding edge of some of these technology launches. And so one of the things we do is really go through a very structured process to say, yes, this application is a fit for the need set, but it's also functionally capable and safe to be within inside of our customers' security portfolio.
Yeah, I would say being on a number of client calls, and as Kevin mentioned initially, it was hey, what are you guys offering? What can we put out there in an immediate fashion? And our approach, where we kind of slow down a little bit, and I think educating the client and being in numerous calls, they really appreciated that approach, because I think we wanted to make sure that, one, no one knew where COVID was heading to, right? Or the time and how long COVID is going to be out in our environment. So I think understanding that if they're going to make an initial investment in technology, that it's also an investment that they can possibly repurpose later for different applications within their environment. So they appreciated the approach. They appreciated us looking into certain aspects, especially if it was tying into the network. What did some of the cyber restrictions and what did network look like? So it was interesting, because it was a combination of hey, what do you have to offer? But then as we slowly went through the process, they understood why it's so important to make the right decision and the right investment.
And subsequently, some of the applications that were first to market, you found out that their false positives or false negative readings are very, very high. They don't actually meet the expectations of what their marketing said that they would accomplish. So things, as they've evolved, have vetted out, and it's not just our customers are asking us for solutions that aren't just about the body temperature reading and the things that are associated to that. It's also about gathering and face masks and other things that are, other video analytics, which are actually in reality more core to what a lot of our partners already do. Many of our solutions providers have different levels of analytics that have been used in financial institutions or retails for many years, and then they could be augmented now to have different variations. And these are proven solutions, and now they have variations that will look at things like congregating of individuals or people counting or wearing face masks. So I think the combination of what is now transpiring is more of a fuller and more trusted solution.
I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, Nelly, was that when your clients are going out and they're buying equipment, and you don't necessarily know if it's going to be applicable. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing today is with the FDA regulations, right? I've said this all along from the very beginning. COVID is like trying to secure a ghost. Right, because you don't know what you're going against. You don't know, what the persistence rate is. You don't know how it's transmitted. We know virtually nothing about it, and yet we're called in to say, hey, can you tell us, you got to help protect us. And it's taking us into an area both from security and, we had mentioned this a couple of times before in prior conversations. We're no longer looking at, to us, health and safety was trip and fall. And now all of a sudden you're looking at, you're asking security, people in the security industry to incorporate medical capabilities, looking at temperatures, looking at stuff like that. And it was just kind of funny because once all of this started, some of the equipment that was available, or it still is available, needs to get FDA approval. Otherwise, as the FDA ruled back in March, you can use the equipment. We're taking the regulations away. You could use whatever equipment you want, but once this is over, the equipment's no longer authorized, and that's really a problem, right? Because that's where you get the people that come out that are looking to create the vaporware, the one and dones, come out, sell you a piece of equipment, and either the company builds up rapidly and they move on, they sell, and you never go find them again, or they just go out of business. They take their money and run. So it's the valid point that you were making about the one and dones with like FDA and regulatory issues that you're going to face.
Yeah, and it was we saw a combination. I mean, I think overall we looked at, and Doug will talk a little bit more about it, but we looked at over 30 different types of solutions, which covered the different spectrums from handhelds to portables to walkthrough devices, and it was interesting. Actually, Kevin and I were on the phone one day, and we saw the NBC News, and they had a new solution that was coming out for the medical field, and it was actually one of the products that we had evaluated. But it was really early on. It was a startup company, and it was just something that was part of our due diligence process. We wanted to make sure that from a supply chain aspect that we're going to be able to meet the demand of the client, and also be able to service it, to install it and service it day two, and have the proper training to go along with it.
I think we definitely want to delve into the product evaluation process. I think we want to get Doug into the conversation here. But first, we just want to remind the listeners that you're listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by Jim Henry and myself, Sal Lafreri. We're going to invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like us to consult with you, you can also do that through the website at theriskadvisor.com and set that up with us. So let's talk about the product evaluation process. And for those listening, we're going to suggest that you go to the show notes on our website. Go to the blog, go to the show notes section, and take a look at the website, and you're going to see some PowerPoint document there describing in detail what we're about to talk about now. So, Doug, maybe you can jump in here. We've kind of omitted you from the beginning, but maybe we can make up some time. How does Securitas go about product evaluation and research?
Thanks. As we set about researching and evaluating, security technology that might help with these return to work solutions, and particularly as we're talking about, camera technology, thermal camera technology that could potentially detect elevated body temperature, we found right now there's probably over 150 different solutions on the market. We took a very deep dive into over 50 of those solutions, but we did it with a committee. It wasn't just one person. We have a product evaluation committee at Securitas Electronic Security that's made up of different people within our organization. We have procurement and the supply chain team taking a look at distribution channels and product availability and cost. We have solution architects that pay attention to product features and integration capabilities. We have our installation and service leaders looking at products. What does the training material look like? How are we going to go about doing installation and service of these? And just as importantly, we have representatives from our IT team taking a look at the hardware and the software, because we want to make sure that anything that we deploy is secure. And that played a big part in the evaluation or selection process, because back in 2019 with the National Defense Authorization Act, there were specific products that were banned for sale and use by federal agencies. And as we looked at that and steered away from Hikvision and Dahua in particular, We also recommended to our U.S. customers that we avoid those. Also concerned about sanctions that were put into place around that might prohibit those companies from actually applying firmware or software that might have a U.S. patent and making future firmware updates difficult and potentially introducing cybersecurity or not being able to keep ONVIF compliant. So there were things there around the NDAA Act that influenced our product decision.
So Doug,
But really,
talk us
it was a
through.
team of people.
Talk us through the entire process that you go through. All right, so your salespeople get a request, or Kevin or Nelson get a request from a client, and they're talking about a specific need of a product. Talk us through what's the internal process you go to, and how do you go through all of that?
Right. Well, it's not just looking at the technology, it's also looking at the company. We have a number of criteria that we'll put in front of any product evaluation, and it relates to company statistics, how long they've been in business, maturity, longevity of the product. We look at the country of origin for the chips that are embedded in the hardware and try to understand the software for any cyber concerns. And then as it related to thermal cameras for body temperature detection, we were looking to see, is it currently FDA 510K compliant, or is that company in the process of applying for that? We're also looking at their advertised accuracy. And then for select products that we actually want to take a deep dive into, we'll obtain that unit. We'll run through lab testing. That could be for thermal cameras or any other product that we want to really evaluate. And we have, then statistics that we record, we measure that against the advertised claims from the manufacturer. But there were over 30 different criteria points for thermal camera detection.
And one of the things I just wanted to add too was also we wanted to look at integration. Is a solution that's out there, will it integrate to a client's existing VMS system or access control system? So if it was used in a standalone environment, it was a different solution, and potentially that can be used across the enterprise and integrating into the different platforms within their security network.
Additionally, some of the products, as we got down to our final kind of set, possible applications that we would recommend to our clients, because we have monitoring centers that are 24/7, 365, and very critical in nature to both our business but also to our clients, we actually put some of these applications within our monitoring centers to actually test against our own employee base to see how they would work and what the employee interaction with the application would look like and feel like. So not just what people were saying, we actually validated them within our offices as we went back to more of a move from a go from home work environment to actually an office environment as well.
So, Doug, you had mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you've tested at this point or evaluated about 50 solutions out of the initial 150 or so that you identified. But with this changing environment, with the on again, off again of openings and new technologies coming out, almost daily, has that original list of 150 changed much? Do you have many in the queue now going forward? How can you speak to how you're handling that dynamic moving target?
Yeah. We actually have really 3 offerings right now that have been working well for us. One of them falls into what I'll call a standalone portable category from a company called Seek Thermal. Their Seek Scan unit is very quick and easy to deploy. We can set up this thermal camera on a tripod. And it incorporates what's called a black body or a temperature reference device, so that this thermal camera can get a reading on a very consistent preset temperature as a reference point, and it helps with some calibration. The
Doug,
Seek
let me
Scan
ask you a
unit
Doug, let me
plugs
ask you a
into a
question.
laptop, and it's really easy to deploy.
Doug, let me ask you a question. Not to cut you off, but Before we get into the solutions part of it, I mean, clearly we want to hear about the solutions part, but I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I'm thinking about you're a global company. What are some of the considerations on deploying that technology globally? Is there, so in your evaluation of the product, you had mentioned, you talked about, we have, you're looking at the chipsets, you're looking at the software, you're looking at the hardware, you're looking at the components. Does the factor of where that's going to play and where it's going to be deployed become part of the evaluation, or is that something that you make it the best that you can and then go back and have to turn switches off if it can't do certain things that it's wouldn't be allowed to do in a certain country?
Well, the solutions that we picked, are NDA compliant, so they can be sold and used in the U.S. Product availability is going to be of concern for a global customer. Can we get the product? Is it available? We're seeing some long lead times in some of the thermal camera technology right now, but most of it is able to be procured in about 4 to 6 weeks. Seems to be about the lead time at the moment. So that's something to consider. And then collecting information, personal information, is something to be concerned about. The solutions that we adopted tend to be more anonymous. We're not building a personal profile of an employee and their temperature history over time. We're just keeping that information more anonymous, because there was some concern just about personal information collection and storage. So those are all things to think about.
We're hearing that now with contact tracing. People worrying about how much data is going to be kept and how do they identify each other, and and all of that. So yeah, you do run into those issues.
Sal, I was just gonna add on to the question about global, and our approach here in North America was concentrated on our North American client base. We have different groups globally that we're working in parallel and also evaluating and testing other solutions. And what we would do is we would collaborate and share results and share best practices, because there were different solutions that can be utilized in different regions of of the globe. So as Doug had mentioned, here regarding the NDAA in Europe and in Asia, those products weren't banned, and it was actually products that were ready to go to market. So speed from that perspective, because the product had already been launched and because it had already been tested, we saw different clients in different regions taking selecting those solutions and moving forward with them.
So Kevin, as the chief operating officer of this global operation, one of the things Doug had just mentioned was, you're looking at lead time on product could be 4 to 6 weeks. How difficult is it for you when a client comes in and says, 6 weeks, this is over, I need it now?
In reality, a couple of weeks ago, we were wishing it was going to be over in 6 weeks. Maybe that's not the case anymore. But, it is something, I think this stretched the market. There was definitely some capacity issues, as this was something that I don't think anybody was really prepared for, at least for that type of application. I mean, obviously, there's been body temperature reading devices and other things that, as we talked about earlier, that are core to what security integrators do. But I think in using it in these applications and getting them deployed at the speed, most of them were initially startup organizations. And the bigger, larger VMS organizations really weren't in the forefront of it. So when you think about your largest IP camera manufacturers and VMS organizations, they weren't part of the initial discussion. It was more of the kind of startup organizations. So I think as this has continued to go on and the adaptation of this from a client base has grown, you're now seeing the large organizations that we have longer history relationships with that have more throughput to be able to manage the capacity of this. look, in reality, I don't think we ever thought we were going to run out of toilet paper and paper towels either. But I think there's always pressures when you get into these emotional environments. I'm sure we'll get over this hump, and then the capacity related issues associated to supply chain for these applications will kind of diminish, and we should be able to have a more predictable run rate for deployment.
You are listening to the Risk Advisor podcast, hosted by myself, Jim Henry, and Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and to follow us on our social media like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, please go to our webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So we are going to now move to the third segment of solutions. We've touched a little bit on that, in the first two, and again, to be somewhat rhetorical to what we've talked about before, this has not been easy. It's been there's a lot of moving targets here, and one of the most difficult things to tell a client is no. So I think that sharing the processes that Kevin and Nelson and Doug have gone through here, and the visibility of that process to clients, I would think would really enhance the trusted relationship that an integrator has to have with with your clients. So the solutions go through that vetting process. So what types, Doug? Can you go through the types of solutions that you've adopted for body temperature detection as one of the metrics?
Absolutely. And as we looked at the technology that could be used for measuring external body temperature, we found different form factors from handheld devices. There was a category for thermal cameras. We saw some that were on a mobile cart. We also saw some that were being adopted into a portal format, much like walking through a metal detector. And what we saw value in was being able to use the thermal camera technology really to get some distance between the tester and the subject matter. There are a lot of handheld devices, non-contact infrared thermometers. There's even thermal cameras that are in a handheld form factor. But really, trying to move those people apart, increase social distancing, and really have a more comfortable, experience was what we were after. So we migrated to the thermal camera technology as a potential solution. And we found that we could get an accurate reading when they're set up properly and calibrated and configured the way they should be, and used following the guidelines that FDA put out, which we'll talk more about here in a bit. They could be as effective as a handheld thermometer could be. And we didn't end up with just one solution. We found several for different needs. The first one being, as I mentioned earlier, the Seek Scan, the standalone portable solution. It was very quick and easy to deploy, the camera on a tripod. And as I mentioned, this black body, this temperature reference device used for really some calibration, a reference point for the camera to know what that preset temperature is. We'd set the black body to 100 degrees. The camera would have that as a reference point, and then we could, have something to measure against as somebody stood on the mark about 5 feet away, and we took a measurement. We could get then a pretty good read on their external body temperature. Seek Scan was really easy. It simply plugs into a laptop with a USB cable, loads some software, simple pass-fail interface. If your temperature is below the defined threshold, say it's 100 degrees, it flashes green. If we detect elevated body temperature goes over that threshold, it would flash red and make an audible alert. So very simple system to use. And that was what we called the standalone portable solution. We also created another one that was a little more versatile. We partnered with a company called Mobotics. We liked their camera just because it had integration capability, as Nelson mentioned. We had customers that wanted to record the video stream, that wanted to maybe give consideration to connecting to access control. Within the unit itself, it had a little red-green LED that we could program to light depending on the temperature reading. It also had a built-in microphone and speakers, so somebody could be, listening and talking through the camera. It could have outbound email and text messages. So it was just very flexible and configurable. And so we like that with the Mobotic solution. And then the other category was using FLIR cameras that were already FDA 510 cleared, and then coupling them with some software from a company called Viper Vision or SmartLX. These are companies that have used thermal cameras for years, usually in outdoor applications measuring critical infrastructure, oil and gas. These cameras could detect slight temperature deviations, and so the cameras were tried and true. The software was pretty mature. It was just modified and adopted to now taking external body temperature readings. So we had not one, but several different solutions depending on our customer needs.
So clearly you're indicating the importance not only of the product selection, but in setting the environment to be able to increase the accuracy. And it sounds like that's even more important when you attempt to do this in an outdoor environment. Would you say that outdoors is still a more challenging application than in an indoor or lobby environment where you have more control of the factors?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we look to the some ISO and IEC standards that were actually developed for the use of, thermal cameras for temperature detection in this scenario. And there were some guidelines there that we want to follow, really testing one person at a time. We want to use a black body or temperature reference device in the camera field of view to get the most accurate reading. And it needs to be set up and calibrated so that it's accurate. And if it is done properly, we're seeing results on some of these systems that are within, plus minus 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit of a handheld non-contact infrared thermometer. So they can be as accurate as the thermometer. And the distance between the subject matter and the camera can vary depending on the solution. The SeekScan portable unit, you're about 5 feet from the camera to the subject matter. Mobotics can go a little bit further. Using the FLIR cameras with the Viper Vision or SmartLX software, the read was actually a lot closer. And really, those software applications are really keying in on the inner eye duct, or the medial canthus, as it's called, of the eye, where we're going to get the closest reading to core body temperature. And so using some video analytics software, we key in on that portion of the eye, we get the most reading, or the most accurate reading, but again, a lot closer read range to get that kind of resolution and that kind of accuracy. But they should be used indoors. We need a controlled environment. Temperature matters, humidity matters, lighting matters. I want to make sure that we've got a very stable, environment. I want to have a solid backdrop. Don't want to be looking out through the window. And we've also been following some recent guidelines that FDA published on how to set these up, distance, lighting, and height of the camera. All things that are making it accurate.
It sounds a lot like the early versions of facial recognition. The same issues that we saw then, where you needed to have proper lighting, you had to be within certain tolerances of angles of the person.
Absolutely, all of that matters. Again, the best reading will always be, if the software will support it, the inner canthus of the eye. Other solutions we found aren't able to pinpoint that and are just going to go for the hottest portion of the face. But all of the solutions we looked at are really trying to key in on that headshot and get an external body temperature reading, on the forehead or the eye if the software supports it with analytics.
So when going back to post 9/11 and the big rush to a lot of perimeter detection systems and whatnot, and in the decades I've spent as an integrator, we always knew that a combination of technologies, of triangulating technologies, was a much more effective way to reduce nuisance alarm rate and false alarm rate and increase accuracy. And I think the same principle holds here for COVID detection. You know, temperature is one element, but I think as time evolves, and Doug, would you agree, we're going to see more multi-factor elements of measuring attributes that could indicate, you know, whether or not COVID is present, and then furthering that into integration with other systems so that COVID in particular, or just health metrics are going to become one of the multiple factors that are considered, you know, when we look at access control systems and decisions that are made on solutions for allowing people into certain areas?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing, contact tracing being a big element, using access control systems now to track, where people are going. And, if they are found to be, ill, we could then go back and run custom reports to see, where that person was and who they came in proximity to. We're seeing the same thing with video analytics, using facial recognition to do some contract tracing reports there as well. And we're also adapting the software for PPE detection, to detect if somebody's wearing a face mask. Video analytics also being used for social distancing. So, it's easy for the software to measure the distance between moving objects. We could potentially activate an alert if we've got a group of people standing too close together. And the final one would be just in occupancy counting. It's not difficult to take the technology that we've got and train it on a room and do some people counting. And we're seeing some solutions that will actually give us real-time displays for the occupants themselves to see how things are coming and going, and if we exceed an occupancy count. So the video analytics is playing a role here in some of these return to work tools.
And Jim, to your point, in both Sal mentioned facial recognition, and when you think about these applications, for the most part, the initial introduction are all sitting on the edge, right? They're usually in the lobby, or most of the time in the lobby, and just like the introduction or the advancement of the biometric, right? And we talk about where security technology has gone, and why do I need a card if I have a fingerprint or a facial recognition or something of that nature? And with that expansion of the technology, the obstacle becomes throughput. So ultimately, there's going to be this push-pull dynamic where, yes, we want these technologies on the edge, but as people do go back, and the purpose of them is to be able to allow people back in the workforce, back into the office environment. Now, when you start to bring 1,000 people in all at 9 o'clock in the morning into a lobby in New York City or any other large city around the country, what's the throughput? Are you going to have people now backed up, for 35 minutes waiting to get into their office environment because it's the speed to market was critically important, the safety of associates critically important, and justifiably so. Sooner or later, just like other biometrics that have been in the market for a long time, it's how do they manage the throughput? How are we able to get people into their office environment in a very efficient manner? And when you think about social distancing, the worst thing you want to do is have people congregate in a lobby waiting to get through a turnstile or waiting to get through an entry portal. So there will be additional obstacles as these technologies evolve and as the environment in the world in which we play and involve, and people do go back to these two office locations, because they're not only going to be 20 people offices in a small commercial retail space. They're going to be high-rise buildings in New York City, and you have thousands of people all going to work at 9 o'clock in the morning. So
we did a traffic study with one of the clients we had looked at. And if you have 1.5 million square foot building with a population of about 6,000 people coming into the building each day, it was taking about 11 and a half hours to get everybody into the building if you actually went with the social distancing requirements. And it's just 11 and a half hours to just get them in. Not about getting them out, get them in.
So Doug, one of the real ways to minimize that congestion model and chaos that can be created by rejecting people, at the entry point, is to not have the people that will be rejected. And the best way to do that is to have some means of vetting them beforehand, shortly beforehand, like within, hours or a day of, when they're coming into a facility. Then that gets into, some of the self-testing or self-validation, and maybe some automation of testing being implemented by the individual. So you keep the HIPAA confidentiality. Are you looking at some of those systems now that are coming out to aid in in that self-validation, so that they're it's almost like a pre-screening for TSA, and there's less like I say, there's less chance of a rejection there at the entry point.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a health self-assessment, if you will, could be a very important part of the process. And we're working with some clients right now that have actually blended a self-assessment for their employee, whether they're going to the office or even if they're working at home. We've got some clients that require that self-assessment either way. But then having a form, a checklist, a series of questions that are asked, are you feeling well? Do you have a cough? Are you running a fever? Other things like that can be on the self-assessment. But then if they do go into the office, combining that with the temperature reading and blending those processes together, and that's worked really well for some of our customers. We've taken our Securitas SecureStat All Clear mobile application and modified that so that we have a health assessment form built in. So as somebody is going in to open a store, or maybe it's a bank branch, they can go through that health assessment questionnaire as an integral part of their opening procedure. That information stored in the cloud and made available to the appropriate team members. So you can see that we can kind of layer these different solutions together to come up with an effective return to work process.
Well, I think that's just about going to wrap it all up for us. Kevin, if someone wants more information on the products that Doug had been talking about, how do we get them to find out more?
Well, obviously, you could reach out to us via the website, and then LinkedIn and Twitter, and our social media pages are all updated. We've also been doing, with regard to so much of the world going virtual, we've been hosting a lot of these types of discussions with our customers or anybody that's interested related to new technologies. And obviously, thermal imaging and thermal cameras, body temperature reading cameras, have been one of the discussion points that have come up, and really driven by our top tier customers continually asking us for the solutions that we see, leading, coming to the forefront of those. So we're driving those discussions with our customers. We record those WebExes as well, make them available. And any information, or if there's any information, you can contact us on the website, or you can call Nelson on his cell phone.
Thanks.
Hold on, we'll give you his number now. As Nelson climbs under the table. Anyway, guys, we really want to thank you for coming. It was really good having you in-house. Doug, it was great having you online chatting. And again, you've been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and myself, Sal Lafreri. We're going to ask you to subscribe to this show and to like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event or would like to consult with us, we're going to ask you to go to the webpage, theriskadvisor.com, and let's set that up. Also, if you happen to know someone that would make a great guest, we're going to ask you to do the same thing. Go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com and make that suggestion. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform. You can hear it on YouTube. And, of course, you can stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Well, again, thank you for listening, and we hope to tune in next week. Thanks.
theriskadvisor.com